Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Now, in this episode, we're exploring a complex situation unfolding in Ukraine with Kyrylo Budanov, the head of Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, warning about the stormy weather on the horizon. Not the literal rain, nor the Trump trial, but a flurry of Russian missiles, bombs, and ground troops. In an interview with the BBC, Budanov mentioned a complex situation on the Ukrainian front lines around mid-May to early June. Complex in military speak is basically your partner saying, we need to talk. So let's get on with it. Here comes our latest report.
The situation in Ukraine is dire, with some voices warning that without substantial aid, Ukraine could face defeat by the end of the year. Russian forces have capitalized on the political wrangling in the US Congress over aid allocation, making gains along the 1,000-kilometer front in eastern and southern Ukraine. But the recent passage in the US aid bill is anticipated to lead to the quick resumption of ammunition and weapon shipments to Ukraine, providing a much-needed boost to the Ukrainian military. These supplies are crucial for Ukraine to counter Russia's expected summer offensive and potentially inflict significant losses. The aid bill's passage has reportedly boosted the morale of both Ukrainian population and military. Some of the assistance could arrive at the Ukrainian border within days. The upcoming summer is expected to be pivotal, with Russia planning a large-scale offensive possibly targeting key regions such as Donetsk, Kharkiv and Zaporizhia. The bombardment of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, has intensified, signaling the approach of the offensive. The stabilization of the front is seen as an opportunity for Ukraine to rebuild its forces in preparation for a possible large-scale offensive next year. A new mobilization bill passed earlier this month aims to recruit more men for the front, offering relief to those who have been in combat for over 2 years.
They were queues to join the military at the beginning of Russia's invasion, and now, to put it mildly, there are no queues. Somewhere, at some stage, trust was lost. Right now, our task is to renew it.
But even with the aid now flowing into Ukraine, the country still faces a great challenge. With Russian forces planning an offensive, the upcoming summer will be yet another test of resilience for the war-torn country.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Ukraine's head of military intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov, pointed out that Russia's missile stock is replenishing after a year-long pause, hence why the energy grid is back in the crosshairs. Despite the grim forecast, Budanov insists that Ukraine is not losing the war. He warns of a challenging period ahead, but at the same time reassures us that Ukraine has been through tough times before. And Ukraine's military intelligence chief isn't the only one sounding the alarm. President Zelensky predicted a big mobilization of Russian troops, 300,000 to be exact. So if you're wondering if Russia needs a pause to recuperate, the answer is no. For the time being, the Russian armed forces are on the move, claiming villages in eastern Ukraine and terrorizing the broader society with missile campaigns. But Kyiv have some ideas in store. So what's Ukraine's plan? According to another official, the only way for Ukraine to win is to ramp up Russian losses 2 or 3 times so that they feel the pinch. In practical terms, Kyiv needs to bulk up on its offensive measures, as Budanov claims Russia will be pulling a comprehensive approach for their operations. I'm assuming that means using every tool in the box, and maybe even the box itself, to shake things up in multiple fronts. According to military experts, Russia is rolling out new recruits at the rate of about 30,000 a month. And that's why Ukraine must up their game by inflicting heavier losses against Russian troops. And another thing, boosting troop rotation is crucial. No one should be expected to hold the line non-stop for years on end without getting well-deserved rest. However, if Ukraine lets Russia catch their breath for a couple of years, they'll be back with renewed strength. So Ukraine's future strategy looks a bit like Israel, staying militarily ready at all times, because the alternative is letting Russia play a slow game of territorial Pac-Man. And while the US logistics are sorting themselves out in Germany and Poland, Ukraine is out there counting artillery shells and hoping that the new supplies arrive before the next series of Russia's greatest hits. So maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe that's just Russians firing more missiles. Anyhow, fortunately, more Patriot systems donated by NATO allies are on the way, so here's to their swift arrival and that Ukrainian skies can be more secure. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Sergei Somliny, Director of the European Resilience Initiative Center. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you for having invited me today.
So we're trying to decipher the current situation in the front line, and according to a lot of Ukrainian intelligence, we're looking at a hard time ahead. Can you help break it down for us?
Well, the situation on the front line in Ukraine is way far from being easy. The reason is very obvious. The Ukrainian army lacks of every type of ammunition and weapons. They need artillery shells, anti-air systems like interceptor missiles, etc. And as from the US for months, no ammunition and no arms came. We hope, all of us, that the situation will soon change, as President Joe Biden announced he would sign the Ukraine aid bill within the next hours. But until these weapons come, the situation is very severe. And the European Union also hasn't managed to produce 1 million shells, which were promised to Ukraine 1 year ago. So from both sides, Ukraine suffering from lack of ammunition. And yes, Russians using this opportunity to attack Ukraine with everything Russians have.
Right. And like you mentioned, we do know that hopefully the munitions will be coming to Ukraine soon. However, on the east of Ukraine, there's also reports about Russians severely outmanning Ukrainians, sometimes even 10-1. Do you think there's any way that the situation can be alleviated?
Well, 155 millimeter artillery shells are the answer to any attempt of the Russians to storm Ukrainian positions using the superior number of troops. That is obvious. And we have seen that as long as Ukraine had all the shells, it was not a problem for Ukraine to counter-strike and to stop Russian, as Ukrainians call them, meat waves. But since the last several weeks, as Ukraine has gone out of shells and interceptor missiles, the situation has gone very severe. We know that the Ukrainians cannot, during the last weeks and I would say 1.5 months, cannot counter Russian airstrikes. The Russian jets are flying absolutely freely around the front line. They're dropping free fall bombs up to 3-ton bombs, like 2-ton, 3-ton bombs, regularly pounding Ukrainian positions. And then they send these troops which outman the Ukrainians. So that is a very unhappy combination of several factors: lack of air defense, lack of artillery, and a lot of newly conscripted Russian troops. And this combination makes it so complicated. Many initiatives try to support Ukrainian army with drones, with kamikaze drones, which can be used as a supplement for a deficit of ammunition, but they cannot substitute a total lack of ammunition. And once again, we hope that Ukraine will get what any army needs: long-range missiles, artillery shells, anti-air missiles, and the situation will change.
Right, so it definitely sounds like the ammunition is going to be key when it comes to Ukraine being able to defend itself. And as we are speaking, like you said, just in a few hours, we will hopefully see Joe Biden signing the dotted line to transport this ammunition to Ukraine. However, when we look at that, I'm also curious about the Russian reaction to these supplements, because I'm sure that we're not the only one that is aware that the ammunition situation is what's going to change the battlefield. How do you think Russians are going to react to this?
Well, the Russians have already reacted. First, they have blamed the US for escalation. That is what the Russians always do. An interesting detail: they have blamed the House of voting on this Ukraine aid bill on 20th April, saying, "Oh, the House has voted on the birthday of Adolf Hitler. That is a sign that they are all Nazis in their hearts." I wonder, so many Russian pundits and experts know exactly when is the birthday of Adolf Hitler. I think that says a lot about them, not about the House. And then they have started to threaten with nukes. It is also pretty typical for Russia. The Russians want to undermine, of course, this supply. They want that at least the Europeans don't join the US. I think that these threats will go in vain. They will not have any effect. But what the Russians can do, and what they are already doing, they are trying to use the last hours and days of this window of opportunity for them, using unprotected Ukrainian cities like Kharkiv and others as targets. Russians have started mass bombardments of Kharkiv several days ago. They have hit some infrastructure objects, power plants, television station, and a lot of residential area. And they try to Ukraine as much as possible, using this time when Ukraine cannot strike back. And this is a very dangerous moment for Ukrainians now.
Do you think they see the passage of the package going the way that it went? Because it does seem to me like a lot of Russians were actually caught off guard. Do you think they knew that this would happen, or do you think it caught them by surprise?
I think it came as a shock for them, because they believe that this process, which lasted for several months, this blockade by the Republicans, that it will run forever, or at least for several months until the November elections, and the Russians will continue to use their superiority in air and continue using the fact that Ukraine cannot strike back. And then when suddenly, during like several hours, the situation changed completely, like 180 degrees, it was a shock for the Russians. And I think that it is because they have overestimated their capacities of undermining and infiltrating the Republican Party, and they couldn't believe that that Speaker Johnson can change his mind. What was, as far as we understand, a result of a lot of efforts from the Ukrainians and from the pro-Ukrainian Americans, who came to Johnson and to other politicians within the Republican Party and explained them what Russian occupation means. We know that, for example, one of Ukrainian evangelical priests who has lost his wife and his child in Russian bombardment visited the U.S. and met Speaker Johnson. Speaker Johnson is known for being an evangelical. And this Ukrainian priest explained the suffering of the Ukrainian Christians under Russian occupation. The Russians have destroyed 600 of evangelical churches and parishes on the occupied territory. They have tortured a lot of Christian priests, and they have killed several priests, not only evangelical Baptist, but also Orthodox priests. And I think that this presentation of the terror of the Russians against the Christians on the occupied territories has influenced many conservative Republicans, as they suddenly started to understand it's not about like some geopolitical interests or a big chessboard game. It is about the life of people like they are, who are suffering under terrorist regime occupation.
Right, and that U-turn that you just mentioned, the bill passing through, because again, the Russians weren't expecting it. Do you think that this U-turn is going to give Ukraine some breathing room, as the Russians may have to regroup, rethink their tactic, and have to reorient themselves?
Well, we need to understand this 61 billion package is not a silver bullet. This will not end the war. This is significant. This is extremely important for Ukraine. It's extremely important for the Ukrainian army. And this will give Ukraine several months to take a breath, to fight the Russians back, to stop the Russian advance on many parts of the front. But it will not end the war. And exactly as the delivery of HIMARS rocket artillery in 2022, or IFVs like Bradleys and other equipment helped to stop the Russian advance and to liberate several territories. This will help the Ukrainians, but this will not end the war. This is the war of attrition. The question is not if Ukraine gets today or tomorrow another significant package. It is about the strategic dominance of the West against Russia and strategic support for Ukraine. We need not only in the EU, we need not only to rely on the US, but to expand our production of arms, of weapons, and ensure Ukraine that we will be able to deliver them month for month enough equipment and ammunition and arms to be better equipped, to be stronger than Russia in any single moment. This is about what we need. It's not about one package a year or one package every 6 months. It is about strategic, step-by-step, and very sustainable dominance on the technological level, on the level of production.
All right, and I would like to circle back to the issue with manpower, because we also know that Ukraine is increasing its conscription efforts and even putting restriction on consular service for men abroad that's of conscription age. Do you think this is going to help not just the number, but actually performance in the front, seeing that these are people who already fled the country in the first place?
Well, the situation is very complicated, I would say. It is a topic which is under severe discussion within Ukraine and by the Ukrainians themselves. We know that Ukraine needs rotation. They need fresh troops. They need new manpower. The troops which are on the front line, they are tired. They need to have their rest. Many of these soldiers are volunteers who volunteered in 2022. And are fighting for over 2 years already and feel being like unfairly treated. They said, okay, we came as volunteers in March 22, and now we are the only one who fight. That is a problem. Another problem is you cannot really win people to force them come back to Ukraine and to fight only by saying them, okay, we will not prolong your passport, or we will not we will not issue you a power of attorney if you need to come to the consulate and do. This is this is a lose-lose situation, because Ukraine needs this man, but these men are afraid to come back. And we know there are cases also when, for example, families came with their minor children, like boys in the age of 16 or 17, in 22 to Poland or to Germany. Now these boys are already over 18. They're in conscription age. But it is because the war is that long. And now they face the necessity to come back. And this is not what you can... It is understandable from the technological level, from the level of necessity, military necessity. But this is very hard to explain on the political level. And we also may not forget that in Ukraine, the conscription is not being implemented to men under the age of 27. Ukraine doesn't mobilize men of the age under 27. And this is also the number of potential soldiers who are in Ukraine already, who can be conscripted, but everyone is afraid to conscript them because of the political consequence, because nobody wants to say, okay, I'm the one who says our boys should go to the front. That is a problem for Ukraine, of course. But I hope that when the ammunition and arms come, to Ukraine, more volunteers will join the army, because nobody wants to join the army when the army doesn't have the basic ammunition. But as soon as Ukraine gets new cool arms and will demonstrate some success on the front line, I'm pretty sure that the number of volunteers will increase in Ukraine.
Right, definitely. So it does seem like this package is not only going to help Ukraine with weaponry, but also help boost morale. And again, like you mentioned, this is a very harsh situation and kind of sheds light on the harsh reality of war. There's only hard choices and harder choices. So unfortunately, that's a situation we are staring down at right now. Meanwhile, thank you so much for your analysis, your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the latest stories from the East that you don't want to miss. In a startling revelation at the Demographic Future of Ukraine Forum in Kyiv, Ukrainian Minister of Social Policy announced that Ukraine's population has plummeted by approximately 20 million since 1991, now standing at around 35 million. The decline in the past year has been particularly alarming for the nation.
In 2023, only 187 children were born in Ukraine, a number that is alarmingly lower even compared to the tumultuous year of 1991. With a current growth rate of 0.9, Ukraine's demographic situation is comparable to that of Hong Kong and significantly lower than many European countries. To make matters worse, estimates suggest that up to 7 million Ukrainian citizens have moved abroad, with over 4 million now residing in the European Union. The Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine emphasized the urgent need to create opportunities that will not only retain those fighting within the country, but also inspire those abroad to return. The focus is not solely on Ukrainian immigrants fleeing the war, but also on Ukrainians across generations and active foreigners who are ready to choose Ukraine for their development at home. According to various studies, the readiness of Ukrainian citizens to return has been decreasing each year. However, Zaunovich remains hopeful drawing parallels with Ukraine's resilience in overcoming past adversaries such as famine, repression, displacements and totalitarianism. She believes that the nation can find the strength to rebuild once again.
Ukraine has announced restrictions on consular services for men of conscription age living outside the country. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba stated that the decision aims to bolster troop numbers amid the ongoing conflict with Russian forces.
The restrictions, which affect men aged 18 to 60, were put in place as part of Ukraine's efforts to ensure all citizens contribute to the nation's defense. Minister Kuleba emphasized that residing abroad does not exempt citizens from their duties in Ukraine. He expressed that while some are fighting on the front lines, others should not expect to receive state services without fulfilling their obligations. This development follows the recent law on mobilization signed by President Zelensky, requiring all conscription-age men to update their draft data. The law also addresses penalties for draft evasion, highlighting the country's determination to enforce participation in national defense. As the situation evolves, further clarifications on the legal process for obtaining consular services are expected.
In a move that tightens the grip on civil liberties, authorities in Minsk are preparing to introduce a ban that would prevent men of conscription age from leaving the country. This development comes amid ongoing concerns over the state of civil freedoms in Belarus and the potential implication for the country's young men.
The opposition organization Belpol, citing several sources, has reported that the Belarusian government is set to prohibit all citizens who are subject to military draft from traveling abroad for a specified period. The proposed restriction targets men aged 18 to 27 who are either already on the military register or are obliged to be, and who are not currently in the reserves. The travel ban is expected to be automatically enforced upon the announcement of a relevant decree concerning the draft. According to Belpol sources, the ban would be lifted once the military draft period concludes. With 2 drafts per year, one in spring and one in autumn, Belpol suggests that the draft-age men could be barred from foreign travel up to 8 months out of the year.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.